Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic Re.Con Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask, and this week's guests are some old friends that I have recently reconnected with, Abraham and Debbie Valadez. Welcome. Welcome to both of you. It's been a while since there was a couple on the show, and it's great to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you also. Thank you, Eddie, for inviting us.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Well, before we get into your story, let's start with Our Father. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. So, Debbie, maybe you can start with maybe childhood, maybe your the beginning of your journey.
Okay. Yes. So I grew up with a split family, basically. My mother and father divorced before I was a year old. And so he was there at my birth, but he thought, I guess, by cultural, I guess, men like provide money and don't necessarily need to be there, I guess is what his belief was. So he kind of moved on and went with the divorce, and it was a civil marriage, so it was pretty they just had to do it civilly through the court. And so I lived primarily with my biological mother and my grandmother for a long part of my life. And so he wasn't in it until I was like 10, 11. And so some things had happened while I was living with my mom, just some molestation, some just like assault. And so my grandma, she would take me to church a lot. I mean, she tried to be the best, I guess, other parent that she could be. She was a mother of 7, a single mother of 7. And I always like try to seek her, no matter where my mom moved. In actually Caldwell, Idaho, I would find her. Like I would just go like in breakfast, go find her, go to the park, play, especially during the summertime, eat lunch, go visit my grandma, maybe get some money for like swimming. But I always wanted to seek her, I think, because she was a big part of bringing me into her church. And so I loved it. I loved the singing. I loved that atmosphere. But because things have happened, that's, I think, when I realized there was a God. Like I was like, there's a purpose for my life, like at a young age. And then there came a time where I guess my dad, he had gotten pulled over and had to provide that it was him, because he had a green card at the time, maybe permanent resident. I don't know how they did it back in 95. But he had to have my mother sign off that was him, that he wasn't illegal, something like that. And so she said, the only way I'm going to sign off on this, because he remarried through the church actually with another woman. They had a son. And so she said, the only way I'm going to sign off on this is if you come and see your daughter. Like you need to come and see your daughter. So his wife, my mother, who's been a great person in my life. I don't even like to call her stepmother. She's been a great mother because my mom had some addiction issues that she had to deal with, which is why I kind of suffered through the trauma that I did. And I would seek my grandma a lot. He came, and it was just supposed to be like for him to meet me. Well, apparently I was at a friend's house. The next thing I know, my mom comes and gets me, and she has me pack a suitcase to go with my dad and my stepmom and my brother. So I was like, whoa, like from Caldwell to my dad's. And so then, yeah, I started there. I started going. So I went back and forth between my dad, my stepmom, and their son, and then my mom, and then she'd have different boyfriends. She had a long-term boyfriend for a while, and I had a younger sister, and I have older siblings, also step siblings, but I grew up with them, and they taught me a lot. We kind of helped each other and grew together until I was 10 or 11, and then around the time I moved with my dad, apparently they separated, and there was some trauma that happened with my sister. And but I always held on, even though I was far away. I remember taking a picture of my sister, and I just wanted to protect her. I just felt like I was away from her. Like that's who I was scared to leave behind. And so I put her picture in my room, and I remember going to my parents' house, my dad and my mom's house, and they had like the Virgin Mary and crosses. And so I hadn't seen that part of the aspect. And so when we had talked about when I started going to school there, and my dad had finally made the choice that I was not going to be with my mom anymore because there was an incident when he let me go back for the summer. I got assaulted and molested again, and I called him right away, and he just came that day from work, and he's a farmer. So, I mean, it was hard for him to like leave his, the farm to come and, it's hard to do that. And so he came 2 hours from Twin Falls, Murta, Idaho. And he started getting custody in order. And he said, Mija, which is my daughter in Spanish, you're not going to see your mom anymore. It's not a good place. I'm sorry you missed your sister, but it's not your job to protect her. That's your mom's job. And so that was hard for me because I was the oldest, I guess, of like my mom's kids. So that was hard for me to accept because I'd always take her with me to the park or things like that. And so I was just blessed that my grandma had put that thing about that, just that thought of there is a God, like there is something outside myself. And then I grew up until I was about 17, 18. I stayed with my parents till I graduated. And during the meantime, my mother had another son with someone else. And I wanted to take care of him, but my dad was like, no, like that's not your responsibility. And she's still doing the same thing. So we lived primarily around Mormons. There's Mormon hidden Catholics, I guess. Like people wouldn't say that they were Catholic. They wouldn't say like they would go to another church over in Burley, I think was the closest one, about 30 minutes away from Murtaugh. And so it was kind of like you're either Mormon or nothing, basically. But nobody really said that they were Catholic. And I remember my dad would say, well, the farmer, because he's a farmer migrant worker, he said, well, my boss came to me and he said, I'll get Sundays off if I convert to Mormonism, and they take a little bit of, I'll get paid more and they'll just take a little bit of my check. He's like, I'm not doing that. We're Catholic. And I remember I wanted to go to Mutual. I wanted to seek God again. And my dad was like, no, we're Catholic. But the issue was we didn't go to church. We went to like cultural things like baptisms, like the sacraments, first communion. I never went to a confirmation. I don't remember that, but quinceañeras, like even that's not even a real sacrament. I mean, if we go back in history, it was just more of it's a cultural thing. Yeah. The woman, you're becoming a woman now. So, in Hispanic culture, it's like, it's no surprise that you like get pregnant or get married right after, unfortunately. Like that's the culture. Like you're telling everybody she's a woman now, and so so yeah. And then I remember I asked my dad, I'm like, well, how come if we're Catholic, why didn't I get a quinceañera? And so he's like, well, we just, he's like, oh, you don't need that, we just haven't gone to church for a while, so we couldn't do it in time, that's all he said. And then but we just never went to church, but we were Catholic is what they would say. We had the Virgin Mary, we had the crucifixes, everything. And then I remember what I loved was before we would travel, we'd go back to Ontario with my stepmom Cruz, and she, we would do I think it's called the bendición. We just, when we go Father, Son, Holy Spirit, anytime we travel, when we leave, when we come back, that's something that they would do. I think Our the Father also, before we went to bed, they did that. So there was a huge presence of just like prayer, but just not the church. And that's what I think was really missing, because even though I moved with my father, there was still trauma that happened there. There was assault that happened too within that community. And so, you think, oh, my dad's supposed to protect me. Like he took me out, but it happens. And so I never blamed him, but it was just like, I remember he took me to a lady too when I had I guess you would say an anxiety attack. And I remember she prayed over me, and I slept but there was days that I didn't sleep because of all that trauma that wasn't addressed. And so, yeah, so that happened, and then got through high school, and then dated. I think my dad was scared to say, like, he would say, wait till you get married, and so of course, I mean, my stepmom was like, well, she's going to do it anyway, so let her date. But I think in society now, we need to be honest. They were honest with me. I was lucky to have them, or blessed is what I should say, that they were honest with me. They're like, no, at least my dad, he's like, no, you need to say no, then you'll find their true colors. And he would tell me, you're a young lady, just having that father role in my life, my second part of my adolescent life, it was huge because he was like, no, like there's nothing wrong with being married. Like it's beautiful. And then I remember he showed me their wedding pictures, like my mom and my dad, my stepmom Cruz and my dad is stepmom, and they were beautiful. I remember I wanted a wedding with that kind of tradition, just in front of the Eucharist, white, just everything about the Catholicism tradition. I was like, that's what I want. But I didn't really date the guys that were like the best. And my dad would always say, well, you're not going to get that if you marry one of those guys. You need to marry like an educated man or someone with faith. He'd always say that, even though we just I still wonder, I haven't never asked him like, what do you struggle with going back to the church? But then time goes by, I graduate, I go to college. I met Abe at Lewis Clark State College up in northern Idaho, and we started dating, and we got pretty serious, of course, because we're married now. But I remember I wanted to we started taking care of so our oldest, what I say a lot, our oldest is Gabriel. He's 22, but he's actually my adopted half brother. So we decided after a year that we were going to adopt him. And I remember the judge had told me when I was getting permanent guardianship, he said, that's great, you're going to college. He's all, but you're not changing the cycle if the man you're living with, because we were living in sin, he said, you need to get married because it's just going to continue the cycle. So, and if he doesn't want to marry you, you need to like move on. And I was pretty blessed to have a judge in Lewis and Idaho tell me that. He's like, you're not going to change the cycle. And I think he was pretty like conservative religious. And so I was like, okay. And so Abe and I had a talk, and then we started searching for churches, just different churches. And they would ask for Abe to be rebaptized. They would ask me, they're like, well, he needs to be baptized. You both need to be baptized to be married in this church. And I remember, do you remember? It's like,
what we're dating.
it's while we were dating.
Yeah, we were still living together.
We're still living together with Gabriel, who was 5 at the time.
And, what do you call it? And yeah, I do remember just kind of seeking, just different churches. For me, yeah, like Debbie, it was a lot more cultural. I mean, I was definitely, if you were to ask me when I was younger, I was always say Catholic.
Sure.
And so because that cultural your life is centered around the church, right? Without understanding it or without really knowing why we celebrate what we celebrate. And me, as I'm learning about my faith, I'm like, wow, this is why all these celebrations happen. This is why, these are all feast days, and these are all and in that Hispanic culture, it is literally your life, and that's why they have so many parties and stuff, right? Because they take all that serious, and that's the funnest part. However, the part that's missing is the reason, the why, right? Why we have those celebrations. And so yeah, I was always Catholic. However, I didn't really know any different than a Protestant church, right? And so when we were seeking, to me, it just really didn't matter. Yeah, we'll go to whatever. It should all be the same, the normal stuff that you would hear, like, from, when you're going to college, all religions are the same, this and that. But it wasn't until, what was it? We graduated, lived with my parents for a little while, but you were very, very strong about our daughter, because when I graduated my last year, took me 5. She did it in 4, which that says a lot.
We switched majors, but
yeah. So my last year, she was pregnant with our daughter, and we had moved. I graduated, and we moved that fall or summer. We moved in with my parents, and she was very, like, there's this concern, like she didn't want her child to be a bastard, basically, right? And in her words, I mean. And it's a strong word, but it really hit me, and I was like, oh, man, that's actually true. You know what I mean? It hit me like that. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, yeah, we'll get married. Not really even understanding marriage. I knew it's a very important, and even from when I was younger, I was like, yeah, the person that I have relations with is the person I'm gonna marry. That was in my mind, right? From the beginning as well. Um, uh, despite, the cultural aspect, and my parents definitely didn't help with that either. But so I was like, okay, yeah, I had no issues. I already graduated college. She wanted to get married from like this first 6 months that we were together. Like
Yeah.
she was like ready, right? And I was like, no, we gotta like get through school. And then even though we're doing everything else, right? We had to wait till school was done. But so yeah, I didn't have an excuse. So it was like, okay, yeah, let's go to courthouse. Honest to goodness, it was just a quick thing. Like I didn't even tell my parents, which
Oh, wow.
looking back on it,
I
it
told my
was,
parents, I was like, hey, we're gonna get
her
married on this
parents were
day.
there.
Yeah.
I didn't even tell my parents.
Yeah, we just left and she's
and
like, where are you going? Didn't
yeah,
she?
Oh,
when we got
shoot.
back, we were married. Yeah, and
Yeah.
she's like, they're like, whoa, like where did this all come from? And like, why didn't you tell us? I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I just really didn't see it as a big. I knew it was important, but I didn't really
Sure.
I didn't get this like, oh, it's a big deal kind of thing.
Well, part of it was like your mom was sick. We didn't want to like cause more stress on her.
We had a lot of other stuff going on, and one of the other, kind of situations we had. My mom was sick during that time when our daughter was born. The next day, my mom was admitted to the hospital to get the to get treatment. Come to find out, she had cancer in her gallbladder,
Oh,
and so yeah, it was definitely just
Didn't want to put more pressure on her.
yeah,
like
roller
just
coaster stuff, and so there was a lot, of that, which I feel like I think her her witness
mm,
to the faith was I truly was what brought Debbie and I.
she was devout. She was devout.
oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She was always
so
praying.
yeah,
And I remember
so
she said, so when his parents, to kind of put a background, they were married civilly also. And she said, all I remember she told me, she's all, no, you are gonna love it more when you get married the right way. And she spoke Spanish. I'm like, what do you mean the right way? And she's like, be married in the church is beautiful, like in a Catholic church, because she's like, I heard you're going to other churches. She's like, I heard you're going to other churches. And I was like, well, I just didn't, my dad, I thought you guys were Catholic. And I was like, well, my dad says we are, but we didn't go to a Catholic church really, and I remember even during college, I remember my best friend from high school got married in a Catholic church. And I was like, I had a feeling already like, this is it. Like, this is the church. It was just beautiful. It's like everything. You felt Christ, and so, yeah. And so, his mom, my mother-in-law, Yadira, she was like, you need to I want at least one of my children to get married to the church because that's all I wanted. And she felt like it was too late for her apparently because she was sick. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to stress you out. And she's all, no, if anything, that'll bring more life to me. I was like, oh, okay. And so,
yeah, I do remember that too. Yeah, because you're like, yeah, we need to get married to the church. I was like, and that's when I was like, what was it like? In my mind, I was like, well, all these other churches, these Protestant churches want you to get baptized again. I'm already baptized. I'm not gonna get rebaptized. I don't care what church it is, as long as I don't get rebaptized, right? As long as that's not, a stipulation. And so there was no alternative after that, right? Because I was, and
they all wanted him to be rebaptized.
Yeah. So it was, it's one of the, because we didn't understand. I think that's when my mom was like, no, like you got to go through the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so that's when, gosh, what was it? We were going through, you had to go through RCIA.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get my confirmation because I was Catholic. So yeah, we went to the priest, we spoke to him, and kind of was like, okay, yeah, this is what we want to do. And he told her that she doesn't have to be Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, understandably so, is like, but if you want to, it's going to be more beautiful, right? It's going to be more fulfilling. And so she's like, yeah, that's what I want. And so we both went through RCIA because I had to do my confirmation and she had to go through the whole catechism, catechesis.
Yes.
Yep.
And so in that journey, things were just getting unveiled for me, right? I was definitely starting to become more and more on fire for the faith, right? Because as I learned the history, the depth of our faith, driving down the street, coming back on Chinden, I saw Salt and Light Radio on someone's bumper. I saw this bumper sticker. I was like, oh, what's that? And then I never turned it to anything else after that. Like that's all I've listened to. I mean, this was like 2012, I think, 2012. Yeah. And so that I feel like Catholic radio was another kind of what would you call it? Learning experience there and really understanding what it is to be a Catholic man, right? And so from then on, is you kind of start just kind of being stronger with your convictions, as opposed to just kind of being like, yeah, everything's all right.
Well, we're both of you kind of going through that process together. Like we were both kind of becoming stronger and stronger through RCIA, learning things that you wish you had known earlier. Yeah,
absolutely. Because just like Debbie, my parents, we went to church when we were like going to do our like
sacraments,
right? So for first communion, all of a sudden we started going to church, and now we're going to classes. Okay, cool. It's like, and looking back on it, it's like, well, yeah, the priest probably was like, well, if you're gonna be serious, you want them to do their first communion, you gotta come to church, and so we would go to church to finish the what do you call it, the sacrament. And once we got the sacrament, then it was just like, okay, back to normal kind of thing. And I remember my dad would say, it's like, well, we gotta go and we would go to church once in a while. I wouldn't know when we went. I just knew we went occasionally, right? And it was just, and then I remember my dad saying, well, we have to make sure God knows we're with him. You know what I mean? So that's why we're going. So he knew it was important to visit God. But it wasn't to that level of like, being consistent every week or anything like that. So yeah, growing up, I didn't really understand how to be faithful, right? Sure. To God. And so, fast forward, going through RCIA, learning crazy tons, learned how to pray the rosary, talked to my mom about it. And I think she started praying the rosary. I don't think she really prayed the rosary unless somebody had died. You know what I mean?
The novena, that was the only thing that we understood novenas were for.
Novenas are for, when people die, kind of thing. So, kind of growing into that more recently, that, you can pray your novena for any intention, right? So my mom started praying the rosary, and we became stronger and stronger in our faith. And, I mean, I think all the way till the end, she would just pray every night, that I remember.
And she'd receive communion. Like that gave me another, and I went kind of through like a mental breakdown, I guess you could say, while she was really praying the rosary and sick. And she would show me this book of like Spanish prayers. I was like, there's a book? Like, like even though we got married through the church, just seeing her devout faith and then the prayers she had, and then having a lady from church to give her the Eucharist, the body of Christ at home because she couldn't make it to church, and just seeing that faith that she had. I remember Abe, I think you might have heard it from Salt and Light Radio. He had told her, she was crying. She was like, why do we suffer so much? And in my head, I was just like, oh, because you're gonna be a saint, And I told her that, she started crying, but Abe had told her, well, use prayer for those you're suffering for the good, like pray for your suffering. What did you exactly say?
Offer it up. Something that I heard through Salt and Light or the Catholic radio is like, offer it to God. He's gonna do something.
Oh, there had been something on the radio that was talking about.
Yes, and that's where I remember hearing it quite often, actually, right? Like people, and I feel like the one of the biggest benefits I receive from listening to Catholic media, Salt and Light, all those guys, is the fact that it's normalizing the suffering, right? And it's part of our journey as people, and as a fallen, the fall of humanity. And but it's not for nothing, right? It's used. God uses it for amazing miracles. And so that's kind of again, back to my mom, that's what I basically said. Like, this you can offer to God and have him, use it for something great. And I truly believe we've been blessed, that we've received, I guess, quite a bit of the benefits, I think, from her prayers and her suffering through our life. Just looking at how things have gone, it's like, it's just some crazy stuff that you just, out of the blue, you just wouldn't even know how to receive it. And all I can remember during this time was, we'll give it to God. We'll allow God to work in our life, right? Whether it's, Debbie not wanting to go to work anymore, and just be like, okay, well, if you don't want to go, to work anymore, don't go to work. We'll figure it out. She was making more than I was at the time, man. I was like, it's like, oh, Jesus, help us out here.
I think you told us we prayed the rosary for 10 days, didn't we?
Yeah, during that time, it was like the only times I remember.
Maybe it was a novena.
I prayed out loud, like, God, help me, and help, allow me to give more to my church, help, give me something.
Yeah, it sounds like once you got into RCIA, if I'm hearing you correctly, like there was no turning back. You've gotten, further and further into the faith. There's been some healing happening there, clearly. I was pulling up a quote. I don't know if you know Louis and Zelly Martin, St. Teresa's parents. I don't know who said it, but Buddy just sent this to me just the other day, and it's a picture of the two of them. No, happiness can't be found here below, and it's a bad sign when all goes well. In his wisdom, God wanted it this way to make us remember that the world is not our true home. And I thought that was beautiful. And so when I see you guys, a married couple, and to have such a witness, obviously Abe, your mom, and the witness of other, I'm sure at the parish that you're at, other examples of married couples, and the importance of witnessing how they deal with different things. In some cases, just how they deal with kids, right? How they raise their children.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, you see other families and stuff, and their kids are all like quiet and stuff. Like, how did that work out?
When we used to go to your church, when we used to be at the same parish, I would look at you guys. I'm like, yep, we're in the same boat right now.
Right there, man. Yeah, out in the hall.
That's right. Out in the hall, you give the nod. Yep, that's right. Anyway, so if you guys can speak a little bit to, I guess, the here and now. How is it? How is the faith in, again, raising the children? You have very young children, right? And how do you apply the faith, and how do you guys stay strong?
Well, I think what's helped too also is the fact that they go to St. Paul's Catholic School also here in Tampa. That's helped us just with the consistency of more prayers. Like, it's educated me as a mother, because I was technically a convert, I guess, in 2012. Like, I'm still, through my children's eyes, I see Christ, like they teach me, but it's also my responsibility to research more. And I think what's helped too is the kids have known, since they were born, basically, they've been in the church as much as we can. I mean, to our family, we're weird, we love our family, but they're like, every day,
every Sunday,
every Sunday. I'm like, we visit you, mom and dad. Why would we not visit God? And it's just interesting that our families are not, not to knock them down. They have the faith, but it's just a different type of drive and faith, and just, urge to see Jesus. I know we have 5 boys and 3 girls, and 4 of them went to St. Paul's, and just when they were going to church, it helped to have other people like kind of like, I don't know if people are scared to tell your children stuff, but it's nice to be in the church and like, hey, turn around, face Jesus, just like as a whole, us as a whole in the church, like helping each other too, like, hey, let's focus, or just let them be, they're going to be unfocused at certain ages.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just giving it to God. What I think is really huge right now is confession has really helped with my 13-year-old, my 10-year-old, my 8-year-old, and myself. And I even brought Quintus, our youngest, with me because we took turns taking some of them to confession last week or a while ago. And then I went this past week, and just the feeling in confession where you confess your sins and the warmth I felt and the absolution of my sins, I felt so guilty. I was like, oh my gosh, like I haven't gone to daily mass. It's like God knows where I'm at. And the new priest that was there, he like educated me on every one of my sins, like instead of just saying absolved. And they're all great, but it was great to be in the confession because he absolved me of my sins, and he gave me like resources for NFP, because we have lots of kids, and I'm very like, I love my kids, but I get scared every time I'm pregnant. I get scared during the birthing process, and just having that ministry of Catholic women and a priest saying, it's okay, give it up to God. Like, just prayers that are given to me by women and the priests, and just even my husband, Abe, like just having that community of like, you'll get through this, just because it can be scary, it can be traumatic, and so that's what's really helped, I think, is receiving the Eucharist and confession and just I don't know how to explain how much that has really helped us, in prayer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. No, I totally believe that the one of the greatest choices that we've made, and not to be like a plug for like a Catholic school like St. Paul's or anything like that, but this is kind of our journey. I feel like if it was really really up to us, we would definitely want to homeschool, right? We feel like our kids should be with us as much as humanly possible.
Sure.
However, I think it was around 2020, things were just kind of going all kinds of craziness, and so we're like, you know what, let's put them in St. Paul's. Let's bite the bullet. We've been wanting to, and and so we did that. First started with our oldest daughter, Zelda, and so she started junior high at St. Paul's, and so definitely she struggled. She struggled a lot, primarily with organization, because there's no accountability. We found that going through the public school system, and they do the best they can. My hope is, but there's really no accountability. That the kids either do their stuff or they don't. And one of the biggest things that we found is that the fact that with our son Demetrius, he was definitely just kind of running the show at school. So it was a good day if he wrote his name on the paper, and they were still going to put him in third grade.
Yeah.
Right? And
with an education
when they went
program
to St. Paul's, he had to get held back, and he was like, why am I doing second grade again? I was like, you never did it to begin with, man. You didn't do anything. Like, so that was one of those things where it's just like, and it's definitely helped us it's held us accountable. Our kids hold us accountable a little bit more, and that's kind of been a weird transition, just because they're really learning the faith big time, and they are on fire for it. And so, Demetrius loves to altar serve. He has a hard time waking up, but if he's altar serving that day, oh boy,
he's up early.
That's
getting
awesome.
on it. Yeah. So that's been huge. Our daughters, they're definitely walking, in the faith when they say things, and obviously they're kids right now, right? So who knows later, but one wants to be a priest, the other wants to be a nun. It's just one of those things. It's like you see this walk, and you're just like, oh my God, this is all him right there, And so, and I truly believe it's because there is this life centered around prayer and Christ, right? They get it at home, they get it at school, they get it back at home. And that's one of those things I really feel that's really going to strengthen them and strengthen us as well, because that's it's not just us. It's not just us being like, you need to pray, or you need to, do this, or you need to wear a veil, or, stuff like that. It's a community that they're kind of around.
Yeah.
That I will is kind of encouraging them, right? And so and so that's been a huge blessing. Been building many relationships around it, and I feel like that's how we got around you, Eddie, and a bunch of other very faithful Catholics that we definitely feel awesome to be around. And so I think that's really helped us out. Going into high school with Zelda, that's been one of those things where I was on the fence with Bishop Kelly, right? Because that's she's going there. And I was like, is it because you hear stories from people like, I guess they were, I want to say people that were like in their 40s that we kind of talked to before, and they're saying like, oh, they didn't have a whole lot of good things to say about it. And I was like, man, if that's what it's gonna be like, I don't know. And then, but kind of interviewing school and really kind of seeing the curriculum, it's helped me put my mind at ease. And she's really excited / scared to be there. But she's got friends that are going, and talking to other parents that have had their kids go through. They say it's a great school, and so yeah. So we're definitely gonna pray for our daughter, and another world.
Well, that's a whole other God thing too, because I remember my friend actually brought this to my attention that goes to St. Paul's. She said, Debbie, I remember it was her 8th grade and it started, and she's like, where do you want to have Zelda go to high school? I was like, well, I haven't thought about till the end of the year, but I think Bishop Kelly would be nice. She's like, how much does it cost? I was like, I don't know, but I'll pray on it. I'll give it to God. Just that's what I was thinking, because that's where I was at. And she said it was crazy that I said that. She found out it's like almost $10,000 to go per kid, and then she got a 4-year scholarship because she worked so hard and prayed so hard. And it was actually a scholarship we weren't even going to turn in because we thought that she didn't have the GPA for it. And there were phone calls, there was prayer, and they just kept going back to her for the second person to receive it. And my friend kept saying, no, but you need to say how it happened, and I was like, well, it's all God, because all I did is ask a few questions and then meet them in person and then pray. And like, she worked hard for it, and and then we prayed. And I think that's huge. If you work hard and then just pray and
yeah, it's definitely, obviously there's effort, right?
Effort, yes, of course.
And work that had to be put in on her end, but in my mind, I was like, man, why are we like,
why are we even trying?
Why are we even doing it? You know what I mean? But at the same time, yeah, it's just like, well, and somebody actually says like, oh, no, she has to maintain a 3.0.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay, so that's why we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so, and honestly, God, and I told my daughter, I was like, you didn't earn this. I'll tell you right now. This was God's hand that, that allowed you to be here. So you better not let him down. That's
incredible.
I got, and I guess, some people might feel like that's strong, but I feel like that's just something that, she really needs to understand and stuff. Don't get me wrong. Again, she's been working really hard, right? She struggled her first year, at St. Paul's, like all the way up, and she's gotten her grades up ever since. And I feel like that's kind of what they really saw, is the fact that there was a progression, and from a transition from public school, not only that, but then like obvious struggle, but then there's a progression, and she is advancing and getting better, right? And so hopefully with God's grace, she will do just fine and continue that journey,
that trajectory. Yeah, I think what stands out in this story is, first of all, Debbie, you were incredibly open, and so were you, Abe, about just the difficulties to even get to this point. So I really appreciate that, and I know people that listen appreciate that as well. But the faith, the amount of faith, everything you're saying, there's just this, I don't know, it's just oozing out of you, the faith. I keep coming back to that. So with that, what would you, both of you, say to married couples that might be struggling with faith or if you want to address individuals. I just feel that you guys have that gift, and it was a heck of a grace that was given to you to have this level of faith. So if you could share some of that wisdom, that would be awesome. No pressure.
Yeah. Okay. Is there something on your mind? I know.
I just feel like, it's like nobody is where they want to be. I think there's this idea, I think, that, if you're not in a certain place by a certain time, that you failed or what have you. And the honest truth is, you if you change that a little bit and understand that it's really not. And somebody actually humbled me with this too, a good friend of mine, because I was complaining to him. I was like, man, like, if this hadn't happened, I'd be here and I would be doing this and I'd be, you know what I mean? And he's like, who says you're in control of anything? And like, who are you? Like, it's like, this is, you have to allow God to work his plan through you and through, like, your journey. And that really just opened my eyes. And it was one, and it was definitely during a time when we were really struggling, because like Debbie said, she had this kind of it was definitely postpartum and some other stuff that just kind of snuck up on us because we just didn't know any better. And so it got to us and stuff. And so that really kind of knocked us down for a while. And so that's when I was kind of just this frustration and then this lack of understanding of what's going on. That's why I was kind of venting to my friend, and that's what he said. And I was like, wow, that's what do you say to that? So since then, it's really been a lot of, let's let God's hand kind of work things out. And I see it in my children, which is the craziest thing. They'll come to me and they'll be like, Dad, I couldn't find this, whatever, right? This thing. And I started praying to God and I found it. Like, it's just like, it was like, he helped me find it. Like, it's like, everything's back to God. Right. And I don't know. I don't really think we have anything to do with that, but I mean, the fact that they just kind of, the first thing they want to do is, okay, let's pray about this. Let's seek God's, help, wisdom, all that stuff. So that's obviously a grace they've received as well. And so, but I really do feel like it's just part of the again, the culture that points to the tradition of, continuously, looking to God and seeking God, and not living your life in fear. Because I do get it. I get it from people at work, who most of them really don't have faith, a lot of it, if they do, and they come to me with this like anxiety about children, right? And they obviously know I have many children, and so they're like, dude, but what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this, and it's like, you got to think about this, you got to think about that. And I was just like, whoa, like, man, we don't live our life in fear, And so, and it always starts with the, well, the joking, like, well, you know how that's done, right? And I was like, man, it's like, I got my PhD in my wife, okay, like, and a master's in baby making. So don't talk to me about
Masters,
like, how things are. Do I know how things are done? It's like, and so then they kind of start, going from a different angle. Is like, if something happened to me, right? And so we've done the best we can to make sure that, obviously, there's financing and stuff. If something does happen, life insurance, all that stuff. If in case something does happen, but I was told, I was like, we don't live our life in fear, and that kind of shut him up. But but this is a young guy, I can't expect him to really kind of understand.
Of course not. Yeah.
Where I'm at, what journey we've been.
And how you respond to him could impact him the rest of his life. I mean, he could say, hey, there was this guy, this Catholic guy at work that really opened my eyes to a different reality. I mean, if you weren't there, he wouldn't know that. Debbie, was there anything you wanted to add?
It was probably the same thing, like, don't live in fear. Because I think as a woman's perspective, and I hear it a lot, we're transparent, and I have Protestant friends, and a lot of them are like, now this might be a touchy subject, but I honestly don't care. Birth control, all the different forms of birth control. It's like, know your body. Like, we need to educate you. Like, I learned a lot about my body now from a massage therapist I went to that learned all these things about her body. She's very against birth control. It's not like, just, she's not even Catholic, but she just knows what it can do to you. And the treatment a woman has to give herself, like postpartum or anything like that, like, birth control is not helping. And to know our body and communicate with our husband, and just don't live in fear. Like, don't let a barrier come in between you and your husband because of that fear, and
Sure.
Natural family planning. Like, there's options. And I just feel like if we a lot of communication, and always have, I think, a Bible next to you, like, and just, if you have a question, look for it. There's tons of resources. Really look at the resources, and don't be afraid to ask questions, because God is all knowing, and he will provide those to you, and he loves you. He loves, everybody, like, and we're his children. And so, just that, the same thing, just don't live in fear. There's always a resource. There's always a way.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for that. Once again, what I liked was the transparency, but I also like the gift of faith, and what you said about the culture, that even despite that fact that going to mass was so infrequent over those years, and not even knowing what sacramental marriage is, through all of that, God was working on you, with you, through you. And you got to see the beauty through the entire journey. And now, and especially in hindsight, you can see what he was doing. So again, just want to thank you, and everyone, please share this, please comment, please like, and subscribe. And until next time, take care and God bless. Bye.